airplane is my goal. But I am not smart enough, I've been told. Brains and guts are what I lack, mainly because my face is black. I asked my father if this was true. He said I wouldn't worry if I were you. Just set your goals and set them high, and let them lift you to the sky. Next time my father went to town, a book about airmen somehow he found. It told of men, some men black, some fair, who met their glory in the air. I read through tears as chills raced my back. My God, I smiled. These pilots are black.
In the state of Mississippi, and as an 8-year-old, I came in contact with my first airplanes, and they were crop dusters, if you know what that is. After seeing that crop duster, I remember asking my father about airplanes, and as I spoke to him, someone standing beside us said that we couldn't do that they'd never known a person of color to do that. So after the meeting was over with, I told my dad, is that true? And he said, no, that's not true. And he bought a book home for me. He brought a book home for me that was written by a pilot from World War II that had flown in World War II. And the book was written about the Tuskegee Airmen, an article telling how they had rescued bombers on a mission who were being shot down by enemy soldiers. And I was so inspired after reading that story that as an 8-year-old, I wrote a poem. And I titled that poem Challenge. And the poem was about the Tuskegee Airmen flying and how it inspired me when I first found out that black people were flying airplanes.
After finding out that the Tuskegee Airmen had flown in World War II, I was very impressed, and I decided that I would do something to challenge myself. So I came up with the name Challenge, and I wrote a poem. And it goes like this. To fly an airplane is my goal. I'm not smart enough, I've been told. Brains and guts are what I like, mainly because my face is black. I asked my father if this was true. He said I wouldn't worry if I were you. Just set your goals and set them high, and let them lift you to the sky. Next time my father went to town, a book about airmen somehow he found. It told of men, some black, some fair, who found their glory in the air. I read through tears as chills raced my back. My God, I smiled. These pilots are black.
First love of planes started when my uncle, who was also a graduate of Texas Southern University, took me to my first air show. It was at what was then called Ellington Air Force Base. Now it's Ellington Airport. But I remember that air show, the Blue Angels flew then, and they just soared by right in front of my eyes. I knew then that I really liked airplanes. Had no idea at this point in my life that I would be somehow affiliated with the management of an airport or even remotely close to an airplane, any closer than I was that day. But I definitely fell in love with flying in airports and aviation when I was a young kid. Like most students, I was not sure what I wanted to do when I grew up. When I was in Texas Southern University, I was an undeclared major. I had done pretty well that semester. I scored A's in I think every subject except one. I don't recall what that subject was, physics. But I was recruited by a lady named Dr. Leday. It was a new program, I think in '87. Professor Nettie, who is now Dr. Nettie, was one of the professors there. He is also a person that worked for the Houston Airport System at the time. He was an airport operations officer. So I was recruited into that department, and I took my first class. It was called Principles in Flight. And I knew then that that's the degree program that I wanted to pursue.
24 information, Quebec. So 187 on the ground, pushback, discussion, advisory taxi, and expect on May 22.
The question is to tell you a bit about the aviation program.
Yes, tell me about the aviation program.
Initially it was called the Airway Science Program, and it was founded by Dr. Naomi Leday as a result of an initiative by the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA wanted to start a series of aviation programs at universities that had standardized curricula and standardized expectations associated with students coming out. And so they proceeded to establish a series of standardized aviation curricula with different areas of concentration. There was aviation management, there was airway computer science, there was also airway systems management, which was for pilots, and there was air traffic control as well. So Texas Southern University offered to have the airway science management concentration as well as airway computer science. So Texas Southern then had two concentrations in aviation: airway computer science and airway science management.
Definitely the technology has changed tremendously. We have the students are equipped with virtual airports now, a vast variety of simulations to simulate real world experiences in the aviation industry or at the airport.
So the AOA driver training simulators that you see today are part of TSU's aviation program, Virtual Airport. The Virtual Airport consists of flight sims, air traffic control simulators, as well as AOA driver training simulators. This is an integral part of the airport management aspect of the aviation industry.
Me and Mr. Baker, we've been knowing each other for as long as I've been in the program. So I could say since 1991. And he was also my mentor when I was in school. So he graduated a few years before me, and I guess you could say he kind of paved the way for the other students to migrate into the industry. He was definitely instrumental in me obtaining some of my job opportunities as well.
My first experience flying is when I went to Tulsa, Oklahoma to look at Spartan College of Aeronautics and Technology. And there I took a discovery flight. And I remember it was really windy that day. So I went in the plane. I had to be about 17 years old. And I can remember the wind pulling the plane. It was like I was flying kind of sideways because it was so windy. But I loved it. I fell in love with it. And once you fall in love with flying, you're in love forever. So that was my first experience with it.
My journey in aviation began as a young girl at the age of 9. I took a trip to the Bahamas with my mother and my brother. And during that trip, as we landed in Marsh Harbor, Abaco, Bahamas, the pilot allowed me and my brother to go into the cockpit. And from that day on, seeing all of those buttons, the instruments, and the different maneuvers that you are allowed to take, and sitting next to the pilots, getting some insight from them, I just knew from that day forward I had to learn more about planes. I had to get into the aviation industry and see what it was like to be a pilot.
And I was flying with my flight instructor to Brazoria County Airport, and the engine quit on me. So it was like, I was panicking at first, and the first thing I said was, "Oh God." And the flight instructor was like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "I didn't do anything." And then I was really close to the airport, about 2 minutes away. And he looked at me, he said, "You're going to land this plane." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to land this plane because I want to live." So I landed the plane on the taxiway instead of the runway, but I knew if I didn't get back in the plane, I would never fly again. So someone from the flight school came to pick me up in a different plane, and I named that plane Buttercup. That's the airplane where I got my license, the airplane I flew and I got my license in. So that was the most memorable experience for me.
Well, there's a myriad of different jobs that students can expect to have. Of course, working for an airport, a large airport, a small airport. Most folks start off in airport operations. There's an outfit called Universal Weather that hires a lot of students. They do trip planning and things of that nature for corporate aviation. We also have students that are working for the Federal Aviation Administration as air traffic controllers and as computer technicians, as well as the folks working for the airline, either as pilots or supervisors, ticket counter supervisors, or in management. Well, I'd like to see the management side of the house grow. I'd like to see it maybe have 200-300 students. I'd also like to see the flying part of it take off as well. I think we're in a unique position right now, being that with the new FAA rules regarding pilots and the mandatory retirement, there'll be a lot of pilots retiring here in the next 5 to 10 years. So if we can produce African American pilots to be out in the industry, I think we'll have a niche that'll last for a long time. Right now, if you think about it, the military, 1% of all the military's pilots are minority. That means African American or female. So there's a niche out there for African American pilots in the industry as well as in the military. So I think the next step in aviation is to go back to supersonic travel with the Concorde, because the Concorde flew for almost 20 years, and to go from New York to Paris in 4 hours is a whole lot better than sitting on an airplane going from New York to Paris in 7 to 9 hours. So I think that's the next big wave in transportation is to go supersonic, where business travelers can go from point A to point B quicker. Because back in those days on the Concorde, you could actually leave New York City, fly to London for a business meeting, have lunch, and then come back to New York the same day with the Concorde. There's just a multitude of various jobs that you can get within aviation, not just as pilots or air traffic controllers. You have airport operators, you have airlines, air carrier operators, you have general aviation airports that function for the general public, and then you have other entities called fixed base operators that cater to the corporate aviation world. So there's just a whole lot of things that students can do when they get a degree from aviation management. And now with the new FAA rules that are in place, even pilots now are required to have a bachelor's degree. So before, a lot of them didn't have degrees. They actually had associate's degrees, or they just had the required number of hours to be able to fly a jet aircraft for a commuter airline or the major airlines. So now with that 1,500-hour requirement, they're also required to have a bachelor's degree, which will enhance our programs because we'll get more students coming here to get that degree and also fly. So I think it's a win-win situation all around. And as of right now, we're still the only 4-year bachelor's degree program that offers a degree in aviation science in the state of Texas.